to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Friday, January 3rd, 1941. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:18 a.m. It set at 5:31 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, fair on Friday and Saturday, considerably colder on Saturday, moderate to fresh west and northwest winds. The low temperature, 30 degrees. The high temperature, 49. Today's headline, Mystery Bomb Hits Dublin. Dublin, January 3rd. A single unidentified warplane bombed this capital of neutral Ireland before dawn today, injuring at least 12 persons and damaging several houses. The bombing followed a series of aerial assaults which began Wednesday night on an area within a 60-mile radius of Dublin. Some of the explosives dropped in these attacks were identified as of German type by Irish officials. Dublin's modified screened street lighting was in effect at the time the bombs fell in the capital. Thus far, there has been no demand for a complete blackout of the city. Crowds poured into the damaged area. Their attitude appeared to be one of surprise and bewilderment rather than outrage. The injured persons here were in two houses on Donore Terrace, which received direct hits. Windows were blown from several other houses. Two persons were believed trapped in the wreckage. The windows also were blown out of houses on Dufferin Avenue. Police and soldiers continued digging this morning for others believed buried there. Invading warplanes, apparently German, also loosed new loads of bombs last night near Enniscorthy, 60 miles southwest of Dublin and less than 15 miles inland from the Irish Sea, which separates Ireland and England. No damage or casualties were reported in this case. In the attacks Wednesday night and early yesterday, however, at least 3 civilians were killed and 2 injured in Knockrow near Boris in County Carlow, and one of the bombs was declared by the Defense Department to have borne German markings. The missiles dropped Wednesday night and early yesterday, including a parachute-borne sea mines, which the Irish government said fell inland, lying unexploded and menacing in fields, and bombs which fell on the grounds of Irish Army headquarters. The mines which fell in Glencormac near Enniskerry, County Wicklow, were said by experts to be of German magnetic variety. The German magnetic variety used early in the war before Britain devised a defense against them. The Government Information Bureau said the Army engineers would destroy the mines today and warned residents in a 3-mile radius to open their windows. Residents for a half-mile about have been moved out of their homes. In the 5-hour bombing Wednesday and yesterday morning, the Department of Defense listed these localities as struck. The Old Corral, County Kildare, Racecourse, now Irish Army Headquarters, 3 high-explosive bombs and a large number of incendiaries in the area. Duleek, 5 bombs, and Julianstown, 3 bombs. Both towns are near Drogheda, center of the Irish cattle industry supplying Liverpool, England. Rathdown Park, Terenure, a Dublin suburb, 2 bombs, 2 houses smashed, several damaged. 7 persons trapped in wreckage, but rescued, several persons injured. A fortified road in the Laverna Grove area of the same district, 2 bombs which fell in waste ground, some houses damaged. This was the most widespread bombing of Irish territory yet to take place, although there have been some half-dozen previous incidents of less seriousness. The Irish government announced that the German government had expressed regret for the bombing of Camp Pile on the southeastern Irish coast, in which 3 girls were killed on August 25th. Germany was represented then as not acknowledging that it was a German affair, but as prepared to admit the possibility that a Nazi pilot might have lost his way. London, January 2nd. A new assault by British bombers upon German invasion bases along the French coast was signaled tonight by flashes of flares and muffled explosions visible and audible from across the cold and wind-swept Strait of Dover. German positions between Calais and Boulogne appear to be under attack, with the Boulogne region and the Nazi big gun emplacements at Cape Cris-Nez getting special attention. In this attack, the RAF had to plunge through severely unfavorable weather. Bremen, an important German industrial city, was struck by the raiders for the second night in succession. The assault tonight was said to be along the lines of the raid Wednesday night, when the British claimed the bombers left flames in Bremen that were visible 120 miles away. Tonight, blows were also struck at Emden at the mouth of the Dortmund-Ems Canal. 20,000 incendiary bombs and a great load of high explosives missiles were dumped on the German North Sea military and naval port Wednesday night by relay after of planes, official accounts related. This, the British declared, was partial retaliation for last Sunday night's devastating fire raid on London. The Focke-Wulf plane plant was left a raging furnace, the Air Ministry's accounts said. The Deutsche vacuum oil refinery, one of the largest in Germany, was greatly damaged, and railways of the port were hit again and again, the bulletin continued. Like Mannheim, Bremen also has important shipbuilding yards, which were among the targets of the raid. Starch and rice mills, docks, and warehouses of the port, rivaling Hamburg in importance, and other industrial objectives were declared hit. Anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with a formidable barrage, and 1 or 2 Nazi planes rose to challenge the raiders, but officials said no planes were lost in this or simultaneous attacks on Flushing, Ostend, and Brest. The Germans, acknowledging a raid on northwestern Germany, said 5 persons were killed, several wounded, and 3 factories and a number of homes were damaged. They said 1 British plane was shot down. On the offensive side, the German Air Force was reported to have raided Liverpool, London, Sheffield, and Harwich Wednesday night. The German Air Force singled out the town of South Wales for its overnight firebomb attack while raiding other parts of Britain on a far lighter scale. London had an early evening alarm, but the anti-aircraft guns tossed up a quick barrage, and the all-clear came before midnight after long periods of calm. Towns in the west and southwest of England also reported small raids. Berlin, January 2nd. The German High Command claimed for its Air Force today a 25-1 superiority over the RAF in bombs dropped during the last half of 1940, credited the Air Force and the Navy with sinking 3,900,000 tons of British shipping, and declared that 1941 will bring proof of the effectiveness of the battle against Britain. The report declared the European coast from Narvik, Norway, to the Pyrenees frontier of France and Spain had been made impenetrable to any British landing operations. The High Command added these other claims. In 2,000 attacks since August 8th, the beginning of the retaliation siege of Britain, the Air Force has dropped 92,400,000 pounds of high explosives and 3,520,000 pounds of incendiary bombs on England. England's most important harbors were attacked 350 times, with heaviest damage to Britain's imports and the capacity of these important harbors. There were 130 major air attacks in which 110 tons or more of bombs were dropped on the British Isles since August 8th, and more than 100 attacks on London since September 6th, some of which were of tremendous size. London, January 2nd. Minister of Aircraft Production Lord Beaverbrook's Evening Standard tonight said that Sunday night's fire blitz on London may be a blessing in disguise. It devoted a column editorial under the heading of Dynamite to this argument and declared the raid accomplished what multitudes of local authorities and millions of committees were unable to do in trying to rebuild London into a fit and noble city. It hoped that with the dynamiters now busy bringing down the ruins, a new London will emerge in which the roads will be wide and straight. Amid all these disasters and regrets, the Standard said in its editorial, we realize a great and glorious principle which has been approved. London always needed this done of dynamite, and now she is going to get it. Cairo, Egypt, January 2nd. British mechanized forces were reported operating 75 miles beyond the Egyptian border in Libya today in a possible prelude to an attack on the big Italian base at Tobruk, even before the anticipated fall of besieged Bardia. With these mechanized forces declared to be firmly holding a stretch of the road leading from Bardia to Tobruk, 80 miles west of the Egyptian border, the RAF lashed out anew last night against Bardia on the Mediterranean coast and other fascist objectives deep in the Libyan desert. Besides Bardia, the RAF's objectives included Derna, 175 miles within Libya, and the air bases at Tamini and Gazala. After 17 days of siege, there still was no indication of any immediate British attempt to wrest Bardia from its 20,000 beleaguered defenders. Instead, indications pointed to a likely thrust against Tobruk, where Italian forces have been busily strengthening their defenses. Rome, January 2nd. The Italian High Command today reported air attacks on British mechanized forces besieging Bardia in Libya and on Greek positions in Albania. British artillery, munitions, and motor trucks were abandoned on the North African desert in the face of one of these attacks, the communique said. On the southern Albanian frontier, January 2nd, a Greek pilot claimed today he downed an Italian bomber with the propeller of his plane after running out of machine gun ammunition and captured its crew of 3 at pistol point. His story, as related by military sources, said he exhausted his ammunition in a dogfight, then streaked for the bomber's tail and veered away just in time to avoid a full collision. His blade cut the Italian's rudder and elevator surfaces and forced them to land, he reported, and he sat down in the same pasture with his propeller bent. The Greek met the Italians with his pistol drawn, and they surrendered. Berlin, January 2nd. Germany tonight confirmed the Italian announcement made in Rome earlier in the day that German planes had joined the fascist air force in operations from different bases of the Italian front. Whether the Nazi airmen were fighting in Albania or in North Africa was not disclosed. Reports of British advances in Libya and of Greek advances in Albania have been noted with special interest in Berlin. German Stuka's dive bombers have not been mentioned recently in the customary frequency in German reports of air battles over England. Their fighting value in the Mediterranean would be strong, military experts averred. They cited the successes of Stukas against British naval units in the waters off Norway and said they believed such planes might be able to cripple British naval activity in the Mediterranean. Stukas also proved powerful weapons against tanks in the Battle of France. British military reports have stressed the strength of their tank units fighting in Libya. German organs, which enjoyed the use of semi-official sources of information, now are referring to Yugoslavia's reported claim against Greece as fully justified. Yugoslavia has never forgotten the fate of Southern Macedonia, it was said. For every nationalistic thinking Yugoslav, it is self-evident that someday Salonika must again become Yugoslav property. Belgrade is aware of the fact that this will be possible only with the acquiescence of the Axis powers. But to date, Belgrade has not dared to draw all the necessary conclusions from this fact. A dispatch from Belgrade, Yugoslavia last night said that the German army has requisitioned all school buildings in Graz, Klagenfurt, and throughout Syria and Karanitha to barrack German troop concentrations arriving in southern Austria. Klagenfurt and Villach are German air bases from which Nazi warplanes are flying daily to Italy, these dispatches said. I'm sorry, I stated earlier Syria. It was Styria, Styria. My mistake. For those of you with your atlas out. Athens, January 2nd. Despite bad weather and stiffening Italian resistance, Greek troops in the northern sector of the Albanian battlefront were reported tonight to be slowly continuing their advance. A government spokesman said conditions in this area have not completely stopped our troops from pushing their lines forward after crushing stiff enemy resistance and occupying some villages. Somewhere on the southern Albanian front, January 2nd, an American Army observer today declared the Greeks held the initiative on every front he visited during a week's tour of the southern Albanian sector. Their fighting spirit is superb, remarked Major Thomas T. Craw of the United States Army Air Corps, who arrived here today in a Greek staff car which was machine gunned by an Italian dive bomber along the Adriatic coast. One bullet, Major Craw said, missed him by 3 feet in the ditch where he dived to escape the attacker. New York, January 2nd. McKay Radio reported that the steamer Galgora had radioed today that she had been torpedoed. The ship's position placed her about 500 miles northwest of Dakar, West Africa. No standard shipping registries list a Galgora. Maritime Register today reported the recent sinking of 5 merchant vessels, including the Scottish Maiden, 6,993-ton British tanker. The Scottish Maiden was torpedoed, the Register said, but no details were given on the other losses, all freighters. They were the 5,225-ton British Kenbane Head, the 1,456-ton Norwegian Kong Havden, and the 1,996-ton Con Valera, and the 1,572-ton Gunborg, both Swedish. London, January 2nd. Naval circles tonight said the commander of a wide-ranging and destructive German raider in the Pacific probably is Count Felix von Luckner, World War commander of the German raider Seeadler, meaning Sea Eagle. These sources said they knew von Luckner went to America soon after the war began, and that although he was not a regular officer in the Nazi Navy, the command of a Pacific raider was the sort of job he would get. Hong Kong, January 2nd. The German raider responsible for most, if not all, the sinkings of British ships in the Pacific was declared by travelers arriving here today to be the speedy, comparatively new, former British-owned Glengarry, reported seized by the Germans at Copenhagen and converted into an auxiliary cruiser. These informants said the raider is commanded by a Captain Count von Lucklow. The German Who's Who does not list a Count von Lucklow. The name recalls the exploits of Count Felix von Luckner, World War commander of a German raider which preyed on Allied shipping. The 7,100-ton Glengarry's formerly was operated in the Pacific by the Glen Line. She was launched at Copenhagen in 1939 and is reported to have a speed of 22 knots. Melbourne, Australia, January 2nd. Destruction of the big British liner Orangutan by a German raider which stole alongside an hour before dawn and fired without warning was described today by survivors of the disaster. 6 women were killed outright by the shelling. Many of the survivors displayed wounds on faces, limbs, and bodies. One of the women said the German captain, when ushering them aboard the raider as captives, asked, "Don't you British women ever cry?" They were among 496 survivors of 7 ships who were rescued by Australian ships after being marooned December 21st on Emiru Island near New Guinea by the Sea Raider and a Nazi supply ship on which they had been imprisoned when their ships were sunk. Crews and survivors of 3 other ships still are aboard the Raider, those who were rescued said. The Rangatain's quartermaster L. Valerie said he was at the wheel on the morning of November 26th when he noticed another vessel nearby. At once the stranger opened fire, he said. The first shot crashed through the steering gear and threw the Rangatain out of control. Other shells screamed into the 16,712-ton vessel rapidly, he said, killing 6 stewardesses in their rooms. Ship surgeon Crawford, Valerie continued, gave first aid and the stewards gathered the dead and injured in blankets. There was no time to get stretchers. Valerie and other survivors said the shelling continued even as they were trying to reach the boats. 2 brothers from the engine room were mortally wounded. A Mrs. Langan, sitting beside her 10-year-old son Jimmy, who had part of his leg blown away by a shell, said, "I half carried Jimmy and his brother Brian to a lifeboat. As I did so, I realized that Jimmy was hit, but he never whimpered. To think we were only 3 miles from home in Nauru when it all happened." Bern, Switzerland, January 2nd. The Russians have massed considerable numbers of men and much material along the northern bank of the Dniester River from Lviv to Odessa, and a state of siege has been decreed for Odessa Black Sea port, reports from various sources indicated today. If true, the reports would indicate military experts say that the Russians are expecting difficulties or attacks from the Germans and are planning to abandon the Lviv province in southern Poland. Military informants with a knowledge of the terrain expressed the opinion that such an action is probable, as protection of that region would be difficult unless there were more elaborate fortifications works than are known to exist there. There still is considerable confusion regarding the direction of any possible German onslaught. Reports reaching an informed Yugoslav source spoke of 5 divisions concentrated at Timisoara in Romania. There were other reports of another 5 divisions being stationed at Arad, a town about 37.5 miles northeast of Timisoara. London, January 2nd. Fear that British munitions factories are making armaments for Japan was expressed today by Alfred Edwards, a Labour member of Parliament, in a speech in Middlesbrough. Edwards said he would support workers threatening a strike rather than produce munitions they believe destined for Japanese guns. He said he had written to Prime Minister Winston Churchill for an explanation but received no reply. He said that if munitions were being manufactured for export to Japan to obtain foreign credits, it was disgusting. Neither Japan, Italy, nor Germany would have been able to start hostilities if they had not been supplied with armaments by British and United States manufacturers, Edwards said. London, January 2nd. Lord Beaverbrook, Minister for Aircraft Production, said today Britain has more planes in service and more in reserve than ever before, and that a very good flow is coming from the United States, some of them being flown across the Atlantic. The ministry, he asserted, is pushing industry to the last point of endurance, but he confessed he did not know whether production was anywhere near that of Germany. 4 new types of planes are in production, Lord Beaverbrook disclosed, and 3 of them already are in the air. They are the Manchester Bomber, Sterling Bomber, Whirlwind Fighter, and Tornado Fighter. The latter he described as a gem, the most successful new fighter with greatly increased range and speed, but he gave no details. Britain was said reliably tonight to be urgently seeking additional United States destroyers for convoy duty and to use as anti-submarine patrols on her transatlantic lifelines. An informant who termed this one of the most important ways in which America could expand her aid, intimated the destroyer question and the need for cargo ships to replace those being sunk would be among the first matters brought up when Lord Halifax arrives in Washington as the new British ambassador. British maritime circles pointed to the recent assertion of Food Minister Lord Woolton that the enemy is making a direct attack on our foodstuffs and that the danger is much worse than it was in the last war. To all this, they said the only answer was more convoy and hunting craft. Elizabeth City, North Carolina, January 2nd. Two long-range reconnaissance seaplanes equipped to carry two bombardiers each and destined for the defense of England were poised here today for a non-stop flight to British territory. Members of the party of 13 aboard the plane said two more were due to arrive here later today and two others tomorrow. Berlin, January 2nd. In an exchange of New Year's greetings, Adolf Hitler wired Benito Mussolini that Italy and Germany in coming years will fight to a decisive defeat of the common enemy. Mussolini's message declared that our revolutions and people march in tested comradeship to victory. Montevideo, Uruguay, January 2nd. In an about-face, the Herrerista Party today voted in caucus to support President Alfredo Valdemir's proposals for naval and air bases within the Pan-American defense system. Thus, the country's largest minority party, which under the Constitution controls half the seats of the Senate and 3 cabinet posts, ended 2 months of bitter opposition directed by its leader, Senator Luis Alberto Herrera. He had denounced the proposed bases, which would be built in collaboration with the United States, as a threat of domination by the Northern power. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. Administration approval of the London suggestion that America come to the aid of harassed British shipping by taking over operation of British trade routes in the Pacific was voiced in maritime circles today. The proposal was offered as administration leaders were preparing plans to lease or lend cargo ships to Britain to replace merchant losses suffered through mines, torpedoes, and bombs. The suggestion that this country take over the empire-specific trade routes to relieve British ships for service in the war zone was advanced a year ago. Nothing came of the suggestion at that time because the situation was not as critical as it is today. Peking, China, January 2nd. An apology by the Japanese gendarmerie for their unlawful arrest of 5 United States Marines in a December 30th cabaret incident was demanded tonight by Colonel Alan H. Turnage, Marine Commander here. The Japanese Army Command was informed that, failing to receive such satisfaction, the Americans would refuse to make a local settlement of the affair and would carry it to a higher authority. Turnage also demanded the Japanese promise to take steps to prevent a repetition of such incidents and that those responsible for the arrests be punished. The American version is that the 5 Marines were insulted and threatened in the cabaret by armed and drunken Japanese civilians, that they were innocent of any wrongdoing and were unjustly arrested, that all 5 were held for 17 hours and that 4 were injured by gendarmes. Japanese military authorities maintain silent tonight. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. Representative Earl Lewis, Republican Ohio, charged today that the government of Panama had assigned a Nazi spy to a position enabling him to obtain aerial photographs of the Panama Canal and locks. Just returned from a visit to the canal zone, Lewis said in a House speech that American military authorities were tremendously disturbed by the appointment of a certain Dr. Brunner of Vienna, Germany, as an advisor in city planning for the Republic of Panama. The evident purpose of the appointment of Dr. Brunner, said Lewis, is to enable the Nazis to obtain aerial photographs of the canal and locks. Anyone who has visited the canal and who has seen the cities of Cologne and Panama City can understand that there is no problem of city planning presented by either of these cities. Panama City, Panama, January 2nd. President Dr. Anolfo Arias, in a speech largely devoted to relations between Panama and the United States, said today his government was ready to lend its cooperation to facilitate the defense program that the War and Navy departments of the United States contemplate. In exchange, he said, Panama expects understanding and unselfishness from the United States government. Dr. Arias warned that such cooperation does not and cannot signify the cession of sovereignty or unrestricted jurisdiction over any portion of the nation. London, January 2nd. Women as well as men will be accepted for Britain's volunteer firebomb fighting brigades, Minister of Home Security Herbert Morrison announced today. Fighting firebombs is dangerous work, Morrison said, but the time is long gone by when women can be kept away from dangerous work in defense of their country. London, January 2nd. The Food Ministry tonight decreed that beginning Monday, the meat ration, now officially set at 36 cents per week per person, will be cut by 29.5 cents. From that day, also pork and most waste meats here to throw unrationed will not be available without coupons. Corresponding reductions, the ministry announced, will be made in supplies issued to canteens and catering and residential establishments. A meat shortage has been reported. A reduction in the sugar and meat allowances, which soldiers, sailors, and airmen can obtain while on leave, also will be enforced beginning Monday. Men getting a 14-day leave will be allowed 42 ounces of meat weekly against the present ration of 72 ounces and 12 ounces of sugar compared to 16 ounces as before. Worcester, Massachusetts, January 2nd. A $300,000 order from the British Purchasing Commission for revolvers with which to arm the London Bobbies was announced today by Joseph P. Carney, president of the Harrington and Richardson Arms Company. The order for 25,000 revolvers and retooling will be expedited and enable early shipment. The London police force has never been armed with a revolver, rifle, or similar weapon, Mr. Carney said. Revolver issue is to enable them to help repel an invader. Sofia, Bulgaria, January 2nd. The press today announced that strict measures have been taken against persons charged with spreading rumors considering tendentious and liable to create alarm. Persons purposely spreading such reports will be punished by heavy fines and imprisonment. Copenhagen, Denmark, via Berlin, January 2nd. National soap rationing has confronted Danish bachelors with the choice between one cake of hand soap monthly or a shaving stick. They can't have both. Households get about 14 ounces weekly per member, and soap consumption in laundries, barbershops, and public baths is cut to 75% of normal. Laundries are forbidden to take new customers, and housewives are not permitted to increase the quantity of their laundry. Rationing also is extended to other directions, including butter, which has been fixed at 12 ounces per person weekly, much higher than in most European nations. Budapest, Hungary, January 2nd. The Hungarian Meteorological Institute, the weather guys, they will call them that, stated today that 1940 was the coldest year since 1825 when it began keeping its records. Lisbon, Portugal, December 5th by airmail. Departing from England at this stage of the war is a complicated problem. After numerous credentials have been obtained, a traveler is confronted with the all-important question of transportation. Both boats and airplanes are booked months in advance, and both are uncertain as to departure dates. Without government intervention, it is next to impossible to depart by air. Through the courtesy of the Air Ministry, accredited newspaper reporters are placed on a priority basis for the Lisbon Air Service. I bought a ticket for November 27th and was told to report at a southwestern seaport on November 26th. Arriving there, I was told that the takeoff date had been delayed, but to stand by. The plane finally left on December 4th. Before boarding the plane, each passenger was weighed and taken individually into a private room and questioned by an Army officer and a civilian official. Credentials were checked in detail. After passing this muster, the customs came next. Then the guards took charge. The morning wore on. At 12:30 o'clock, we were ushered out of the wharf 100 yards away and boarded a small motor launch. No one was allowed to remain outside the cabin. A 10-minute run brought us alongside a big four-motored Imperial Airways Clipper. It resembled a huge shark on the surface of the water. All passengers soon were aboard, but difficulty in starting the engine delayed the takeoff another 15 minutes. An efficient steward explained the mechanism of the chairs and how to put on the life belts which form the seat and back of the chair, and how to open the emergency exits. The ship was poised in the takeoff position, so the full throttle was given as soon as all four engines got going. The plane's windows all had shutters, so no views of the surroundings were obtained. However, the launch ride disclosed shipping activity, and inquiry disclosed no German bombers had visited this locality. A skeleton crew of two pilots, a radio operator, and a general handyman operated the plane. The flight to Lisbon was smooth and uneventful. Shutters were removed from the windows after nothing but water was left to see. The lights of Lisbon were particularly welcome after 9 hours in the air and 12 weeks in a blackout country. Facilities here were lacking for night flying, so improvised flares were used. The pilot circled until he picked up a little motor launch with its deck lights, then glided down to a perfect landing beside the launch. The passengers were brought ashore in the boat and customs cleared at 11 p.m. Helsingfors, Finland, by mail. The fate of the Baltic states under Russian rule proves Finland chose the right course in resisting the Soviets to the last ounce of her strength, according to reports reaching Helsingfors from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Travelers said these three nations, which now form part of the Soviet Union, furnish a new example that communism cannot provide a higher standard of living. The classes who worked, saved, and acquired property in the tiny nations rimming the Baltic have been dispossessed, according to reports. It further was charged that within a few weeks after the Soviets replaced the local governments, no one was permitted to own more than 2 pairs of shoes. All purchases are registered in passports. A special permit from the local commissar is required for the purchase of all goods except foodstuffs, which are rationed. The so-called leveling off of the classes was accomplished quickly. It was said that thousands were arrested and disappeared. Some were executed on the night of their arrest, the travelers asserted. The killings were not announced, and the only indignation of the fate of an arrested person was the receipt from the GPU, or secret police, of a bundle containing clothes. The new government's rule by terror was said to have included repressions against the Christian churches and the arrest of leading Christians and certain priests and pastors. Farmers, it was said, have been subjected to pressure to increase their production without hiring additional help. However, since stores have been emptied of their goods and farmers no longer can buy freely, production has begun to decline. It was charged that introduction of collectivized agriculture has been held over farmers' heads as a threat to increase their output. But a large percentage of the farmers has depended upon hired help, and today they are declared to be as thoroughly demoralized as the urban population. According to reports received here, 12,000 Estonians, 10,000 Latvians, and 8,000 Lithuanians have been taken to Russia. Bern, Switzerland, January 3rd. Possibility that a modern La Aiglon might rule France was disclosed today when it was learned that the government of Chief of State Marshal Henri Philippe Pétain and Bonapartists were negotiating for the return of Napoleon's great-grandnephew, last of the emperor's line. Since Adolf Hitler's gesture in returning the ashes of the original La Aiglon, Bonaparte's ill-fated son, who never saw France, the name of the dark, handsome young prince has been mentioned frequently among royalists. Hitler's action was declared by some observers as a forerunner of the Napoleonic Restoration, but friends of Louis Napoleon, Jerome, Victor Emmanuel Marie say he would not be a puppet ruler. He now lives in Switzerland. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now for national news. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. The War Department is preparing to ask the new Congress for an additional $3 billion for armaments in order to provide weapons for an army of 2 million men and facilities for manufacturing material for an army of 4 million men, which would be called to the colors in the event of war. Army officers refused to discuss war implications of the newest bid for billions, which, if granted by Congress, would boost the defense appropriations and authorizations of the current rearmament program to over $20 billion within the space of a year. It was felt in military circles that the new bid for funds indicates that the administration feels United States entry into the war inevitable, or that the Army is to be stripped of all material aid to Britain. Stripped of all material to aid Britain. A year ago, the General Staff was convinced that a well-equipped army of 375,000 men would be sufficient to protect this country from any invasion. Many officers still are convinced this country needs no larger army for purely defensive purposes. They point out that Hitler, in 6 months of operations against England, has not attempted to cross the 20 miles of water, even though he has air superiority. He would, therefore, it is contended, debate a long time about conducting operations over 3,000 miles of ocean, particularly against a nation possessing the world's most powerful navy. The defense estimate was radically revised upward when the administration started its rearmament program late last spring. The General Staff then set the goal at 1,200,000 men. By June 30th, it is estimated that some 1,400,000 men will be under arms, regulars, guardsmen, and conscripts, as the program to train the initial force of 1,200,000 reaches its peak. New York, January 2nd. The storm raised by the war interventionists along the eastern seaboard over William Allen White's recent statement that he favors keeping this country out of Europe's conflict today forced his resignation as chairman of the Committee to Defend America by aiding the Allies. White, 72-year-old publisher of Emporia, Kansas, formed the committee last May to help throw the economic and moral weight of the United States on the side of England and France. In the following months, he saw it develop into the country's most outspoken interventionist group. In a formal statement, White said he was retiring because the need for hard, concentrated, intelligent work on the chairman's job is too much for a man who has to earn a living running a country newspaper. He suggested the post go to some strong, high-visioned young man who could devote full time to the work. Madison, Wisconsin, January 2nd. The Progressive weekly newspaper owned by Senator Robert M. La Follette and his brother Philip, former governor of Wisconsin, today accused President Roosevelt of incendiary oratory in his address to the nation Sunday night. President Roosevelt's incendiary oratory, it could hardly be called a fireside chat, came as a shock to these millions of people who supported him in the belief he was determined to keep this country out of the European war, said the leading editorial of the La Follette publication. The editorial said Mr. Roosevelt had only harsh words for peace in his Sunday night address and added the president's obvious resort to name-calling and his offhand crack that those who oppose his program are doing the sort of work the dictators want done was not softened by his magnanimous disinclination to charge Protestants with being foreign agents. If the practice of calling names and casting slurs on those who refuse to support the administration's foreign policy follows its logical course, the United States will soon assume the trappings of war hysteria and war intolerance. The Progressive said the president's address was an eloquent effort, but his silences were often more eloquent than his words. His report to the nation was as loudly silent on the present state of our own efforts to rearm as it was on the domestic problems which press so urgency for solution. Every American senses the menace abroad, and the world as wholeheartedly supports our program of national and hemispheric defense. But we part company with the president on the crucial issue of where and how this menace shall be met. Morris H. Rubin is editor of The Progressive. Isabel Bacon La Follette, wife of the former governor, is associate editor. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. An outright trade of munitions and war supplies to Great Britain in return for a right-of-way for a military highway through Canada to Alaska was proposed by Representative Andrew Edmonston, Democrat, West Virginia. Edmonston, member of the House Military Affairs Committee, said in an interview he would offer the suggestion at the first meeting of the committee this year. His plan, which he said has been approved by Speaker Sam Rayburn of Texas, would call for a 1,000-foot wide right-of-way on the most direct route between Seattle and all of our air bases in Alaska. If we had this military road, we could get troops up there in a hurry if we had to, and that might be the spot where they would be needed. Construction of a Seattle to Alaska highway has been discussed for many years. An International Highway Commission headed by Representative Warren G. Magnuson, Democrat, Washington, will meet in Washington this month to decide on means of financing the proposed $25 million road. Big Spring, Texas, January 2nd. A Navy patrol bomber carrying 2 men was unreported tonight, hours after 5 crewmen leaped from the storm-battered plane, 1 to his death, 3 others were injured. Radio man A.M. Perry, who landed unhurt, said at La Mesa, Texas, that the men bailed out at 17,000 feet after encountering a terrible storm which broke the plane's windows and sent the craft momentarily out of control. The body of W.S. Persich, machinist mate, was found in a plowed field near Ackerley, Texas, 24 miles to the northwest. His parachute was found a quarter of a mile away. In hospitals were radio man L.J. Hughes and machinist mates H.E. Neff and F. Rishi Jr. Extent of their injuries was not determined. The 2 who stayed with the plane were Lieutenant M. Hansen, Navy pilot, who ordered the men to bail out, and co-pilot R.B. Clark of the Naval Reserve. 2 other long-range bombers which left San Diego, California with the missing plane landed at Corpus Christi late this afternoon. The 3 ships were en route to Pensacola, Florida on a delivery flight. A radio report from the distressed plane at 3 p.m. Chicago time said it was flying blind in a snowstorm over this West Texas prairie country. The report added the pilots wanted to land but could sight no lake, and the flying boat lacked landing wheels. Radio contact was lost shortly thereafter as the plane headed toward the southeast. Perry said the ship seemed to drop 1,000 feet at a time after encountering difficulty in the storm. It was reported the 5 men were ordered to bail out after ice began to form on the wings, and the men were buffeted by a cargo of auxiliary electrical parts. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. The American Legion began a drive today to have the draft law made permanent legislation, but with compulsory military training limited to men 18 to 21 years old. The Legislative Committee of the World War Veterans Organization says Senator Morris Shepherd, Democrat, Texas, and Representative Andrew J. May, Democrat, Kentucky, had agreed to introduce legislation embodying this program tomorrow, the first day of the new Congress. The legislators are chairmen of the Senate and House military committees, respectively. The present draft law, making men 21 to 35 inclusive liable to a year's military training, will expire in 5 years unless reenacted. The Legion proposed an amendment changing the age limits to 18 to 21 and striking out the clause limiting the legislation's life. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. The War Department announced today additional delay ranging from 1 to 3 weeks in tentative plans for mobilizing the 34th and 40th National Guard Divisions and 11 miscellaneous Guard units. Recent torrential rains, lumber strikes, and other conditions over which the War Department had no control were blamed. Heavy rains have hampered construction at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, where the 34th Division will train, and at Camp St. Louis Obispo, California, to which the 40th Division is assigned. Both of these will be delayed about 2 weeks, it was estimated, and the induction of smaller units was postponed up to 3 weeks. The delays affect 25,000 or more men and were the latest of a series of such difficulties that have plagued mobilization of both the National Guard and Selective Service recruits. Honolulu, territory of Hawaii, January 2nd. Otojiro Akuda, acting Japanese consul general, told 200 Japanese nationals at the consulate today they must remain calm and on friendly terms with Americans. Industrial expansion announced yesterday for defense purposes covered a wide range of activities. In Detroit, the Ford Motor Company announced that it has started the construction of a magnesium foundry at its River Rouge plant for the production of lightweight castings for airplane engines. The new plant will cost about $800,000 and is to be ready for production early in March. Present plans call for the production of about 110,000 pounds of magnesium castings monthly, although the company contemplates the installation of 19 furnaces and having a combined capacity of 500,000 pounds monthly. The castings are to be used in the airplane factory the Ford company is building for the production of Pratt & Whitney airplane engines for the Army. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. Facing decisions that will shape the destiny and affect the welfare of the United States for generations to come, the 77th Congress will meet for the first time tomorrow noon. In both the House and Senate, the Democratic Party will have an overwhelming majority. The two houses will be organized and will work in the deepening shadow of foreign war, now falling more and more darkly athwart our country. The acts of this Congress probably will determine whether America is to go into this war with men, ships, and money, or is to keep out. The Congress, almost from its beginning, will be the scene of a mighty battle between the opposing forces on the issue of the war, the interventionists and the non-interventionists. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. The $36 billion 76th Congress virtually concluded the longest session in history today and will expire automatically at noon tomorrow. Technically, tomorrow will be the 367th day of the third and last session of the Congress, although the House adjourned sine die after meeting for an hour and a half today. The President's Senate will meet at 11:30 a.m. tomorrow for farewell remarks and tributes to lame duck and departed members. Appropriations and contract authorizations of the 76th Congress, providing funds for expenditure in the 1940 and 41 fiscal years, aggregated $36,489 million. This peacetime spending record was exceeded only during the World War days, when Congress appropriated a total of $45,947 million for the fiscal years 1918 and 19. In Washington, D.C., January 2nd, in what may be his last Senate speech, Senator Rush D. Holt, Democrat, West Virginia, today accused President Roosevelt of hypocrisy in attacking dictatorship in Germany while trying at the same time to get into bed with Stalin's dictatorship in Russia. The West Virginia senator, who was defeated for renomination this year and will not return to the Senate unless he is appointed to a current vacancy, charged that President Roosevelt's fireside chat last Sunday night was a transitional speech intended to lead the people gradually from the peace pledges of his recent campaign to a full participation in the war. The president's denunciation of the Nazi dictatorship and his failure to condemn the Russian dictatorship proves the hypocrisy of his contention that the European war is a contest between dictatorship and democracy, Senator Holt contended. What is the difference, Holt asked, between the world revolution of Stalin and the world revolution of Hitler? Between the destruction of Christianity in Russia and the destruction of Christianity in Germany, between Russia's invasion of Poland and Finland and Germany's invasion of Poland, Belgium, Holland and Norway, and between Russia's occupation of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and Germany's occupation of Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Denmark. There are two answers, Holt said. First, Germany is fighting England, Russia is not. Second, Germany is a factor against England in world trade, while Russia is not. Russia is in bed, and England, through Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, is pulling at the sheets trying to get into bed with Russia because they think it will help England. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. The Treasury said today the public debt has passed $45 billion, the former statutory limit. The debt passed that mark several days ago, officials said, but it did not show on the books immediately because of delay in reporting baby bond sales at distant post offices. On December 30th, the Treasury said the outstanding debt was $45,1,757,537.38. The new debt limit voted just a few months ago is $49 billion, but Secretary Morgenthau already has spoken of a desire to increase it to approximately $65 billion because of the large deficit expected to arise from the costly defense program. New York, January 2nd. Jacob Jack Burnoff, 34 years old, an ex-convict and known aide of New York racketeers today, was held in $50,000 bail as a material witness after District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey named him as one of the principal figures in the citywide milk racket, described as the biggest racket in the history of the country. Long sought by police as a grand jury witness in connection with Dewey's revival of the milk industry racketeering investigation, assertedly involving millions of dollars in shakedowns, Burnoff was arrested early today by detectives working under the district attorney. Dewey described the arrest as the first big break in the investigation, which had been underway for several months. Small tradesmen and truckmen in the loose milk industry have been the principal victims of the extortion operations, Dewey said. He was reticent about divulging details of the milk racket ring's operations at the present time. New York, January 2nd. Mrs. Catherine Watson, 63, wife of William Watson, vice president of the Sullivan Dry Dock Corporation of Brooklyn, was found slain today in her apartment, her head battered by a heavy instrument. Robbery appeared to be the motive. Police said $100 recently given her by her husband was missing and that normally there would have been other money in the apartment paid as rent by other occupants of the building owned by the Watsons. Investigators said bloody footprints and marks on a corridor wall were the best available clues to the slayer. A married daughter who lives in an apartment in the same building discovered her mother's slain body. Tallahassee, Florida, January 2nd. A law to bar hitchhikers from the highways of Florida was advocated here today by Chief W.F. Reed of the State Patrol. He said he believed Florida was afflicted more than any other state by the thumbers. Last winter, he related, we tried stopping hitchhikers at the state line. Local newspapers razzed us for this activity while gamblers and racketeers were enjoying their winter vacations at Miami and other resorts. The state has only 60 patrolmen, so we're not doing anything about the hitchhikers this year. We need all 60 and many more to work accident prevention. But I certainly believe something should be done by the legislature this year to outlaw the thumbers. We haven't any law against them now. Some of the sheriffs and police in larger cities are picking them up for vagrancy, but that doesn't seem to be enough. The other day, a woman, pretty good looking too, stood on the pavement in the path of my car waving for a ride. When I didn't stop, she thumbed her nose at me. New York, January 2nd. The American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, also known as ASCAP, will file within the next few days the first copyright infringement suit in its fight with radio stations and networks over what music may be played on the air. John G. Payne, general manager of ASCAP, announced late today that he has instructed the society's attorneys to prepare papers for the suit as a result of music played last night on the program starring Fred Allen. You can actually hear that program. We actually played it if you subscribe to the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Both the West and East Coast versions of that program are uploaded there. To be named in the suit, Payne said, are the Texas company sponsor of the program, Buchanan and Company advertising firm handling the broadcast, the Columbia Broadcasting System, and all CBS stations that carried the program. ASCAP charges infringement of the tune Wintergreen for President from Of Thee I Sing, popular musical show of several years ago. The full selection was not played, and the exact nature of the alleged infringement was not stated, but it was pointed out that copyright laws forbid the unauthorized playing of more than 8 bars of a selection protected by copyright. The music was written by the late George Gershwin and the lyrics by his brother Ira. The Columbia Broadcasting System issued the following statement: there is absolutely no basis for such a suit. The tune mentioned was not Wintergreen for President, but an original theme melody. Speaking in behalf of ASCAP, John G. Payne, its general manager, said, the society intends to defend vigorously its composers and authors from piracy and exploitation by the radio monopoly. The music fight arose when the major radio networks refused to sign new contracts in which ASCAP asked higher fees for the right to play music of ASCAP members on the air. The National Broadcasting Company and CBS then were instrumental in establishing Broadcast Music Incorporated to form a rival pool of music for radio use. Most of the popular tunes of the last 50 years were barred January 1st from use on more than 600 radio stations not signing new contracts with ASCAP. The stations subscribing to BMI include most of the large broadcasting units of the country. The United States Department of Justice also has announced it will bring antitrust action shortly against both ASCAP and BMI and against CBS and NBC as organizers of BMI. Spokesmen for both organizations agreed in saying they have heard nothing of an offer to attribute the dispute, which was reported today to have come from James C. Petrillo, president of the American Federation of Musicians. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, January 2nd. A tiny bolt that 5-year-old Patricia Norberg swallowed a week ago while playing with a toy construction set in Lima, Peru, was removed from her right lung today at the Chevalier Jackson Bronchoscopic Clinic. Her condition was reported as satisfactory. Accompanied by her mother, Mrs. William Norberg, she arrived here yesterday after a trip by plane to Miami, Florida. Washington, D.C., January 2nd. Rankings of the major cities changed little under the 1940 census, the Census Bureau said today. The first 10 cities and their populations are New York, 7,454,995. Chicago, 3,396,808. Philadelphia, 1,941,334. Detroit, 1,623,452. Los Angeles, 1,504,277. Cleveland, 878,336. Baltimore, 859,100. St. Louis, 816,048. Boston, 770,816. And Pittsburgh, 671,659. These were the same 10 cities at the top of the list in the 1930 census, and the rankings were the same except that in that decade, Baltimore took 7th place away from St. Louis. Among the larger cities, Washington, D.C., where government employment has greatly increased, had the biggest gain, 36.2%. Hollywood, California, January 2nd. An extortion plot against Betty Grable, screen actress, was revealed today when it was learned a complaint was issued against Betty Westlake, alias the Yellow Hornet. A letter demanding $2,000 was mailed last December 6 to Miss Grable, former wife of Jackie Coogan. It was set forth that unless the money was forthcoming, I will personally come out and get you. It was signed Betty Westlake, alias the Yellow Hornet. The note was sent from Washington, Pennsylvania, and was addressed to the screen actress at her studio here. Newton, Massachusetts, January 2nd. Gerald and Donald Flagg, 7-year-old twins, were always being mistaken for each other. Playmates, teachers, and even their family appreciated the help afforded when Gerald lost 2 front teeth. But just as they relaxed, Donald lost 2 teeth in a wrestling match. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now for local and regional news. Chicago was assured yesterday of its first major aircraft factory under the defense program. After the approval by President Roosevelt and the Defense Commission of a $36,779,300 expansion program for the Studebaker Corporation, it was disclosed that a vast plant is to be constructed by Studebaker here. The plant for the manufacture of airplane engine parts will employ about 4,000 skilled workers. The War Department announced the Studebaker expansion. It was indicated that actual contracts would be completed shortly. The expansion provides for the construction of plants at South Bend and Fort Wayne, Indiana, as well as in Chicago. Airplane engines to be built by Studebaker will be the Wright Aeronautical 2600 type, developing 1,700 to 1,800 horsepower. Studebaker officials said they could make no comment on the contract until it had been signed. It was learned from other sources, however, that the site for the Chicago plant already has been selected. It is to be of the windowless air-conditioned type favored by airplane factory use. Chicago was selected as the site, it was said, because of the vast supply of skilled workers available. The plant will concentrate in the production of engine parts requiring highly skilled labor. Assembly of the various parts to make completed engines will be done at South Bend, the home of the Studebaker Corporation. It was stated that the Studebaker defense program may be much larger eventually than the War Department contracts let yesterday indicate. The War Department contract involves engines to be built only for the United States Army. In addition, the British are said to be negotiating with Studebaker for the building of a large number of airplane engines. It was considered possible that the additional construction work will be required to handle British orders. The president also approved expansion by the Buick division of the General Motors Corporation of plant facilities in Grand Blanc Township, Genesee County, Michigan, for the production of Pratt & Whitney airplane motors. Approval of the Studebaker and Buick expansion and announcement of a number of contracts brought projected War Department expenditures released during the day to more than $80 million. Chicago area companies will share in the total in moderate amounts. Lafayette, Indiana, January 2nd. An appeal for 1 million telegrams urging President Roosevelt and Congress not to abandon hope of bringing about a negotiated peace in Europe and not to repeat this country's tragic mistake of 1917 was made by the Reverend Dr. John A. O'Brien, professor of Notre Dame University, in an address here tonight. The president, in his fireside chat Sunday evening, dismissed as nonsense the demands that this government explore the possibility of a negotiated peace. He said the United States has no right or reason to encourage talk of peace until the aggressor nations abandon their present war plans. Dr. O'Brien's plea for a national peace crusade was made at a huge rally of members of the Holy Name Societies of the Lafayette Deanery at Purdue University in Memorial Hall here. The Most Reverend John F. Knoll, Bishop of Fort Wayne, was guest of honor. Fort Sheridan will become one of the nation's foremost anti-aircraft training centers in 1941. It was predicted yesterday by Colonel John L. Homer, commander of the 61st Coast Artillery and acting commander of the post. Within the next 6 weeks, 2 anti-aircraft outfits will move into the North Shore encampment to form together with the 61st Regiment, which has been at Fort Sheridan since 1924, the 40th Anti-Aircraft Brigade. The incoming units are the 210th Coast Artillery of the Michigan National Guard and the 103rd Coast Artillery of the Kentucky National Guard. Fort Sheridan will become the anti-aircraft training ground for reserve officers from all parts of the country. Units of infantry, the Quartermaster Corps, Ordnance Corps, Signal Corps, and a medical detachment will be relegated to minor places in the makeup of the post, Colonel Homer said. The new 40th Anti-Aircraft Brigade will replace the 14th Cavalry as Fort Sheridan's number 1 outfit. The cavalry unit was accorded this honor for 16 years until its transfer in November to Fort Riley, Kansas, to become part of a new cavalry division. About 6,000 men will be stationed at the post by February 15th, and this number will be increased by 10,000 by April, the commander said. The 40th Anti-Aircraft Brigade will boast the largest number of men, 3,000, with the Corps Area Service Command second with 1,142. The latter outfit furnishes a complete administrative setup for the post, relieving the Tactitorial Army units for all administrative responsibilities. The Recruit Reception Center will accommodate a maximum of 1,000 draftees, while the various service units stationed there will show a total of 913 men. Among the service units are the 50th Signal Battalion, the 48th Quartermaster Battery, the 81st Quartermaster Battery, the 6th Signal Detachment, and the 23rd Ordnance Company. The present organizational structure of the 61st Regiment consists of a headquarters battery, a searchlight battery of 15 lights of 800 million candle power each, and 3 gun batteries, each with 4 3-inch anti-aircraft pieces. The units from Kentucky and Michigan will be similarly organized, although not so large, the commander said. There are 1,755 men in the 61st. The addition of the 2 incoming units will bring the total anti-aircraft personnel to 3,000. The 61st Coast Artillery was the first anti-aircraft regiment organized in the nation, Colonel Homer said. Its active batteries have been together since 1921 when they were stationed at Fort Monroe, Virginia. When the outfit was expanded from a battalion to a regiment in 1924, it traveled cross-country in its own trucks to Fort Sheridan. Publishers of 2 Chicago horse race pamphlets were ordered by Circuit Judge Maurice V. Joyce at East St. Louis yesterday to show cause why they should not be held in contempt of court for alleged violation of his sweeping injunction against bookie betting. The publishers, who were ordered to appear in court next Thursday, are the Winning Horse Corporation, 10 North Clark Street, and the Bulletin Record Publishing Company Incorporated, 608 South Dearborn Street. Both issue scratch sheets. The contempt citation was requested by Louis M. Nolan, Assistant Attorney General, who said that both defendants had been served with copies of the injunction. Judge George Colici ruled yesterday in South State Street Court that evidence of gambling can be used against defendants seized in raids even though police do not have search warrants. The ruling was made in connection with the seizure of 7 persons in a raid on a handbook at 11 North Clark Street New Year's Eve. Charges against the 7 were continued to today to give attorneys time to prepare their defense. George Anderson, 29 years old, colored, 3218 South Wabash Avenue, confessed last night to Sergeant Thomas Brennan of the Wabash Avenue Police that he was one of two robbers who shot and killed William Custer of 10224 South May Street on November 10th. Custer was the motorman of a one-man streetcar. He was shot at 43rd Street and St. Lawrence Avenue. Robert Myrick, 4419 Langley Avenue, a passenger, was wounded by the bandits but recovered. 3 men were burned, 2 severely, when fire swept the 10th floor of the New Michigan Hotel, 2135 South Michigan Avenue, shortly before midnight yesterday. About 400 guests, and many of them in night clothes, were chased to the lobby and street. The injured are George Dempsey, 72 years old, a retired superintendent of the Cermak Road Postal Substation, John F. Burns, 64, a decorator, and Orville Horn, 47, an employee of the Firestone Rubber Company. Dempsey is in the Mercy Hospital in serious condition. Burns is in the People's Hospital, and Horn was given first aid after he dashed to safety down the blazing 10th floor corridor. Second Deputy Fire Marshal Michael J. Cody estimated the damage at $3,000. Guests were said there might have been other injuries if Miss Reva Welsh, switchboard operator, and Charles Hansen, bellhop, had not roused guests on the top 10th floor. Fire of undetermined origin last night drove 40 persons from their apartments in a 3-story building at 922 Webster Avenue. The fire started in the basement. Second Deputy Fire Marshal Michael Cody estimated the damage as $2,000 to the building and about $5,000 to contents of a grocery on the first floor. City Council leaders declared last night that they are not going to be bluffed by the strike ultimatum handed to a council subcommittee yesterday by the leaders of 20 unions. The ultimatum said that the union leaders, headed by Patrick F. Patty Sullivan, president of the Chicago Building Trades Council, stood ready to carry out action taken December 19th at a mass meeting of union workers employed by the city. At that meeting, the workers voted to strike if the council approves in the 1941 city budget a 10% cut in the pay of all salaried union employees. This cut has been recommended by the Finance Committee. The committee, however, has specified that the reduction is not to take any employees' pay below the daily union scale paid in private industry. Construction of 8 sections of the subway tunnel costing $18,770,728 was completed during 1940, and contracts for 15 subway stations to cost $8,146,076 were awarded, Philip Harrington, Commissioner of Subways and Superhighways, reported yesterday. Harrington said 40,500 feet of single tube were mined in 1940 by subway workers, virtually completing the tunnel work in the initial system. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, January 2nd. Federal Judge F. Ryan Duffy, ruling against the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, ASCAP, today held constitutional the Wisconsin law licensing music brokers and requiring them to pay a state finance tax of 25% of fees collected. The court's decision was handed down in a preliminary skirmishing over the suit of Leo Feast Incorporated, a New York music house, to collect $250 from Wiley Young of West Allis, a tavern keeper. The plaintiff alleged that Young had permitted, without ASCAP authority, the playing of the waltz You Saved for Me in his tavern last January 6th. Feast claimed copyright infringement. Young counterclaimed, asserting that neither Feast nor ASCAP had obtained a license under the Wisconsin law. He asked a temporary injunction restraining them from collecting fees for permitting rendition of copyrighted music. This was refused. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And in sports, National Hockey League officials yesterday were in an apparent stall over the riot which followed the Chicago-Detroit hockey game in Chicago Stadium Wednesday night. No disciplinary action was taken against Giacomo Orlando, unwashed Detroit defense player who slugged a spectator, knocking him unconscious, nor was there any clarification of the status of manager Jack Adams in the brawl after witnesses charged he had incited Giacomo to violence. Frank Calder, president of the league for 22 years, fast on his feet and sidestepping hockey jams, had taken no action for hours after hearing of the outbreak. President Bill Tobin of the Blackhawks was conducting an investigation, and referee Bill Stewart said he was waiting for a streetcar when the rioting started. Champaign, Illinois, January 2nd. Illinois defeated Kansas State 45-29 in a basketball game tonight. The Big Six team got off to a 12-9 lead in the first 12 minutes against a reserve team, but the appearance of the Illini regulars led by Walt Evers, Vic Wukovitz, and Art Matheson quickly changed the situation. Illinois led 22-13 at the half. The Illini scored consistently in the second half, which soon found many substitutes in their lineup, 18 players in all being used in the game. Wukovitz with 10 points and Matheson with 8 led the Illini. Lafayette, Indiana, January 2nd. Purdue's Big Ten basketball champions wound up their pre-conference campaign tonight with a 41-28 victory over Indiana State Teachers of Terre Haute. It was the sixth victory in 7 starts for the Boilermakers. Purdue's real margin of scoring superiority was recorded in 2 minutes, 25 seconds toward the end of the first half, which netted 11 points for the Boilermakers while the visitors were standing still. Columbus, Ohio, January 2nd. Ohio State, using a revamped lineup and seeking its second victory in 6 starts, defeated Creighton University 55-42 tonight. Roger Jorgensen, Buckeye sophomore center, took individual scoring honors with 20 points on 9 baskets and 2 free throws. Creighton took a lead in the first 5 minutes, 12-4, but Ohio State forged ahead at halftime, 30-27. DePaul's status as one of the country's ranking undefeated basketball teams ended last night in the Coliseum when the Blue Demons ran into a nimble band of Broncos from Santa Clara and won away 43-39 losers. It was the first DePaul defeat in 8 games this season and climaxed a wild evening in which 7,000 clients saw Loyola yield a thriller to Kansas 41-40 in the first game of a doubleheader. It was the Ramblers' third loss in 7 shots. Santa Clara, fastest team to appear in the doubleheader series this semester, was powered by Big Jim Rickert and Dick Skinny Mangan, who baffled the Demons during most of the tight argument and finished off the game in the final minute when Magnan scored on an out-of-bounds sleeper just after DePaul's Bernie Weckler had counted 3 points to bring the Demons within a basket at 39-41. Co-captain Elmer Gaynor and Ed Sachs shared scoring honors for DePaul with 12 and 10 points respectively, but Bruce Hale of the Broncos matched Gaynor's total before he was ejected on fouls. The scoring hero of the evening, however, was Loyola's red-haired Jewish star, Mickey Rotner, who fired 9 baskets and 4 free throws for more than half of the Ramblers' points and set a season high for individual scoring on the Coliseum floor. This gave Mickey a total of 110 points for 7 games. The best DePaul could do in the first half was a 13-8 lead about midway through the period, Gaynor and Sachs being largely responsible for this margin. Then Passaglia, Mangan, and Furyk made 5 shots so fast that the Demons thought a Pacific Coast wind had swept through the building, and Rickert's free throw gave the Broncos their first lead. This eventually was built up to a 20 to 14 before Kaminsky's follow-up shot and sacks to free throws on Rickert's foul cut the visitors' advantage to 20 to 18 at the half. The second half found the lead changing hands 5 times, DePaul finally going into a 31 to 30 lead on Kaminsky's basket. Master Kaminsky, incidentally, was the only member of the DePaul cast who appeared undisturbed by the visitors' sleight of hand passing, and one-handed shooting. After Bob Feerick had tied it with a free throw, Carter O'Rourke put DePaul ahead again, but Rickert's free throw and basket and Hale's long one-hander gave the Broncos the edge they needed. Loyola trailed 6-0 before getting started against Kansas. The Ramblers were ahead 21-20 at the intermission. The Jayhawks quickly overhauled Loyola in the second half and pushed their margin to 36-28. That was the largest margin enjoyed by either team, for Lee and Rotner began to boost the Rambler tally until the final seconds, when Rotner made his last basket. Los Angeles, California, January 2nd. George Halas, owner-coach of the Chicago Bears football team, which defeated the National League All-Stars here last Sunday in the Pro Bowl championship, may leave St. Vincent's Hospital next Sunday, his physician, Dr. Vern C. Hunt, said tonight. Halas underwent an operation for acute appendicitis on December 22nd. He was allowed to leave his bed for a short time today. The physician says he expects Halas to remain in Los Angeles for a week or 10 days for observation after his release from the hospital. 4 more White Sox members jumped aboard the James Dykes 1941 bandwagon yesterday, raising to 18 the number already eligible for the Streamliner journey to Pasadena, California next month. Leading yesterday's batch of contented performers was pitcher John Rigney, the prospective bridegroom whose signed document arrived in the morning's mail. Later in the day, John called at the park in person, not only to make certain the males hadn't miscarried, but for a few words with Dorothy Comiskey, part owner of the club, and the future Mrs. Rigney. Rigney balked, despite a raise, when he first talked terms with Vice President Harry Grabiner 3 weeks ago. Other signed papers accounted for during the day were dispatched from the winter retreats of outfielder Julius Solters, George Dickey, the catcher who may cause a little worry for other members of that department, and Walter Navy, a left-handed pitcher who at Shreveport last season developed a knack for rescuing. Dickey, brother of Bill, the Yankee star, was purchased from Oklahoma City, where he batted .315 in 113 games for second place among Texas League batsmen. Sox contract affairs have progressed so smoothly that the prospective 1941 lineup, pitchers accepted, is ready for the westward ride. Larry Rosenthal is the lone absentee among the outfielders. The 3 utility infielders, Jim Webb, Dario Latigiani, and Bill Knickerbocker, are in the same class. The mailman hasn't reported on Thornton Lee or Eddie Smith. The Cubs, who probably have had an unpleasant winter thus far, will soon know whether their worries were warranted or whether they didn't worry enough. Contracts will be put in the mails today by General Manager Jim Gallagher. A number of the bloated bondholders will receive offers befitting their work last season, and that means lower wages. Not even one Cub is under contract, as there are 37 on the roster at the moment. It is a cinch there will be painful squawking. The first squawks undoubtedly will be heard early next week. New York, January 2nd. Babe Ruth spent an anxious day today pacing the corridors of French Hospital, where Mrs. Ruth was taken earlier, suffering from a concussion of the brain. The wife of the former home run king slipped and fell in the Ruth's Riverside drive home. Hospital attaches announced that she was resting comfortably and would go home in a few days. And that is sports, and that is the news for Friday, January 3rd, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a swell day, and God bless.